Lindsay here, and this is my review for Ocean's 8.
$16.5 million in each of your bank accounts 5 weeks from now. That's a lot.
This movie wasn't really on my radar very much. Nothing about it really jumped out at me, except maybe the cast as something that would be interesting to me. But I went and saw it anyways, and I think my review can pretty much be summed up in this clip from Mel Brooks's History of the World Part 1.
Nice. Nice. Not thrilling, but nice.
It was just okay. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't great. Really what this movie had going for it was its cast. It had a lot of great actresses in it, and they all did a great job with what they were given. But what they were given wasn't that great. I thought the writing was pretty lazy. There was a lot of pacing problems, especially in the first act. I was a little bit bored, just waiting for things to kind of get going, but they never really exactly got going. Things just happened. There was no ramp up to this big heist that they were gonna do. And since this is an Ocean's movie, it's kind of hard to talk about it and not compare it to the other Ocean's movies, but mostly I'll compare it to the first Ocean's movie, Ocean's 11, with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all those guys. I think as far as the talent, it's very comparable, but story-wise and action-wise is where the wedge comes in between them. And I think the biggest thing is that there was no looming threat. I never for 1 minute thought that these women were gonna get caught at all. There was no tension, there was no question that they were gonna get away with it. There was no single person that could have foiled their plans. There was no obstacle that they really had to overcome. And when there was an obstacle to overcome, they overcame it in like 30 seconds. They fixed it with a phone call. There was nothing permanent to where, oh my gosh, this is gonna affect the entire heist, like in Ocean's 11 when the guy breaks his hand. And for the most part, many of the characters were very one-dimensional. We didn't really get to see a lot of their personality. A few of them here and there, yes. But like Cate Blanchett's character, she did a very good job, but it was kind of it was a milquetoast character. There wasn't a lot of meat to it. Mostly the only character you really get to know is Sandra Bullock's character, the title character, which is perfectly acceptable. But in the other Ocean's movie, you really got a sense of the personalities and the specific expertises that each of the characters had and what part they specifically played in the caper and why those people especially were brought in to do this. In this movie, you really don't know why. You just know that she wants to use all women, which is cool, but then at the end, they show that you needed to bring in one of the male Ocean's crew to pull off your heist. That kind of ruined the whole thing for me. Because spoiler alert, they don't just want to steal this necklace, they're trying to steal all these crown jewels that are also in the Met. And to do that, while they're causing this big distraction of this missing necklace, they have Xiaobo Quinn, who played Yen in the other Ocean's movies, come in and do this dangling high wire thing to pull all these necklaces and jewels off these mannequins that are behind this laser thing that's in a moat. And it was just completely shoehorned in there. It wasn't like an oh moment, it was like an ugh moment, if that makes sense. Because the only other character from the other Ocean's movies that is in this is they talk about Danny Ocean and the fact that he's dead, George Clooney's character, who is the brother of Sandra Bullock's character. And they also hastily shove in Elliot Gould in this scene that really has no bearing on the story or the plot or anything else involved with the movie. They just wanted to have him in there, I guess, as a nod to the other Ocean's movies to connect it even more. but it was completely needless. He's on screen for like 10 seconds and doesn't give the audience or Sandra Bullock's character any kind of useful information, and it doesn't lend anything to the movie. And I think Anne Hathaway was one of the best parts of the film. She did a really good job. She was funny, and she did a good job of playing this very egocentric kind of flibberty-gibbet of an actress, and she pulls it off really well.
Do you want me to set up a meeting?
Yes.
She does a good job. The other person in the movie that I really liked was Awkwafina. She plays the pickpocket, and she was pretty funny too. She had some of the better lines and better moments in the film.
All right, here we go. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Because she might disappear. You saw that?
Those two were really my favorites out of all of them. And another big, huge problem I had with this film was the ending. Because it doesn't end right after the heist. It ends with this montage of what each of the characters is doing with their millions of dollars. And it doesn't make any sense that if that big of amount of money was taken, if it was that big of a heist, and there were cameras everywhere, so they know every single person or have a picture of every single person that went in and out of that building.
Every inch of this place covered.
But less than a year later, one of them has a shop in London, the other one goes from nothing to owning a bar. Someone who was dealing 3-card Monte in Central Park now has this huge penthouse apartment, and it just doesn't seem believable that they would be able to flaunt their money like that without drawing attention to themselves in any way. That it was just, oh, they got away scot-free and this is how they spent all their money. You would think that they'd have to lay low for a little while, even though they framed Sandra Bullock's ex for the entire thing, which was kind of a shitty subplot. But back to what I was saying about a looming threat being missing from this movie. In the Ocean's 11 movie, you had Andy Garcia's character, who was very smart and very tough and was on the lookout for something to happen. And even though they had this guy watching over them and expecting something to happen, they still were able to fool him. They were still able to con a con man. In this movie, there is no such character. There's no single person that was a threat to them at any time. I never felt for a second that there was a threat of exposure by anyone. There was no villain in this movie besides her shitty ex-boyfriend, and if that was supposed to be the villain, it was a terrible villain. Another thing that really bothered me was they're robbing the Met Gala. The Met Gala is where this heist is taking place, but it is shot so claustrophobically, because the Met Gala is like the grandest party in the country. It's very exclusive, it's very opulent, it's very grand, it's very well covered by the media, and celebrities wear these insane outfits and costumes to this thing. And they had a couple celebrity cameos in it, but most of them looked like they were wearing prom dresses, something that they'd wear to some generic red carpet, not the Met Gala. The only thing that you see of this huge party is a little bit of the front steps red carpets, the kitchen area, and then this little dining room. And they show them walking around a little bit in the entryway and stuff, but it did not look grand at all. It didn't look like the Met Gala whatsoever. And while this movie was produced by Steven Soderbergh, it was not directed by him, and it really showed, especially when comparing it to the other Ocean's movies. Steven Soderbergh has this very quick-cut, clippy kind of storytelling that keeps the pace going, and it keeps things moving and hopping, and it really drives the story forward at a very fast pace. And this movie kind of tried to do that, but they did not pull it off, in my opinion. But I mean, this movie isn't terrible by any means. It's very watchable, and there are some funny moments and clever things every now and then. But as far as my recommendation, I'd I'd wait for it to come to Redbox or Netflix. I wouldn't waste time going to see it in the theater. That's gonna do it for this review. Check you later.
Can anyone really be overqualified? This is the Met Gala after...
Gala, the Met Gala.
The gala, yeah.